The first thing is that there is a constant contact, that you're always touching and pushing hands. That's different in fighting, where you can be touching or non-touching. But there is touching in two ways. This is not so much discourse. There is touching with your skin, which is where it must start, and there is touching with your mind. So even if at any time your hands separate, your mind never separates. You just have to wait till their hand comes close enough to touch it. Okay, so constant contact. And this has a lot of positive psychological value for people everywhere when you have especially societies where people are extremely alienated. And they actually, frankly speaking, don't have a lot of contact with people. They have contact with their little computers, but not with people. So that's a point, but constant contact. The second thing is that in pushing hands, you are always shifting your weight back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. You're never standing there like going, like a sumo, I'm going to stand my ground, because that actually violates a large range of things in Tai Chi, not to mention double weighting, not to mention that for that, they have a term in China, they call it bulls butting horns. It's called donio, okay? So you're always shifting weight. And you have to eventually gain a sensitivity. Just as your hand yields, your legs yield. Just as your hand goes forward, your legs go forward. So there's a constant shifting of weight, which is the exact equivalent of the fact that your arms are constantly bending and stretching. They're constantly retracting and extending out. This is constantly going on in pushing hands. You're not just standing there and stiff-arming somebody. So that's critical. Now, the next thing is that you don't want to use your muscular strength. What does that mean? You don't want to depend upon your muscles giving you the abilities you need in push hands, either to yield or to send somebody flying. So the fact is that the deeper you get into pushing hands, the more you go in your insides, and your muscles always want to be relaxed. There's no times you want to tense a muscle like a weightlifter does, or you simply don't want to tense your muscles. And that is easier said than done, because the tensing of muscles is something they involuntarily do when they go into any stressful situation. That's our animal heritage. Okay? So you're trying to actually get past that. It's very useful for being able to have the abilities Tai Chi has, but take it now from the point of view of life. Remember, whenever a person goes into a stress situation, they involuntarily tense. Whatever you want to call that. They do that with their muscles. If they do it in Tai Chi, it's obvious because you're doing it with a back or an arm or a leg muscle. But it's also that the muscles deeper inside your body. When anyone ever goes into any sort of a stress situation, we have 1,613 muscles of the body. If you actually could monitor all of them, you're going to find at least half of them have suddenly gone, and maybe some of the surface ones don't. But the deeper ones always do, because that is built into the animal fight or flight situation. Now, the other thing that happens is that part of this relaxation is that your joints have to become relaxed and not stiff. So the joints are in constant motion in Tai Chi, and you have a sense of them being relaxed, and ultimately the goal is for your joints to become fluidic, like fluid, like water, like boneless is the phrase that's commonly used. Now, another thing that's another basic principle is that your hands, your arms, and eventually your legs are constantly going to be rotating. They're always rotating. It's not that you're coming back in your hands. There's always a tiny rotation. That rotation will eventually become a twisting of all the soft tissues in your body, and that twisting will eventually become a spiraling. The spiraling being exceedingly difficult to do, but the twisting's not that difficult. But at the very least, when you're teaching anybody, there's always this rotation. Now, the other thing that's going to be very important is that your waist is always going to turn. And your waist has two parts to it. Number one is this thing up here where your belly is, your sides, And the other one that was part of the waist, they have two terms in Chinese. It's called yao qua. Yao is basically from your belly button, from your navel, from your lower dantian up to your diaphragm. And Kwa is this area right down here, which you could say is the hip socket, but they're not just talking about the fact your hip socket is rotating, because you can't see that. They are talking about this area constantly folding and bending and compressing and being soft. Because if that happens, the hip socket connects with the spine well, and that is what turns the waist. So there's a constant folding and unfolding of the Kwa. Just as you get into more advanced Tai Chi, there's a constant folding, compression, and opening of the belly. So, but it starts first with the turning that's this way. All Tai Chi starts with first this way, this sort of turning, then it goes to this sort of turning, and then it goes spherical. Those are basically the three ways it goes, each one being progressively more difficult than the one before it, and including the one before it.